Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And a geek for evil.
Yay. So we're here tonight to do one of Ian's wacky what the fuck even is this discussion style discussions. And we're just going to talk about the Death Star. And as Steve kind of just made me recall... I wanted to talk about the Death Star because I'd been getting into audiobooks pretty heavily, and I listened to all three of the new Thrawn trilogy books. And I just kind of had the thought as I was listening to that, like, why is so much shit in Star Wars just revolve around the Death Star? Like, endlessly. Why are there so many? And to the point where, like, we have to keep bringing it back. It was in one movie. It was like the big thing for one movie, and then we had another really good movie. No Death Star, just kind of like the fallout from the Death Star. And then George was like, "Well, I guess we have to do another Death Star. I'm all out of ideas. I can't just have him break out of Jabba's palace the whole movie." So it's like, it just seems that the Death Star is like the one thing that Star Wars always returns to in a really interesting way. Like, you think, okay, the prequels, it's all before the rebellion and everything, so there's no need for a Death Star. And even then, they had to fucking sneak the Death Star in at the very end. Well, if the Jedi see what we're planning, blah, 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 blah. You know, I don't know, it's something that intrigues me. Fucking Palpatine just casually looking at the plans for the Death Star right before he's about to be arrested. It's just always there, ever looming, the Death Star. So I figured it'd be interesting to talk about why is the Death Star so ever present in all Star Wars media, to the point where we had to make a movie around the mission to steal the plans for the Death Star, of which the first movie kind of, you know, just assumes, yeah, well, this happened.
What I think is interesting about it is if we go all the way to A New Hope, and what I love about New Hope, and what I think is, if you were going to make an argument that, I don't see it made very often, but if you want to make an argument like what is the best Star Wars movie, I still think you can make an argument for New Hope, simply because I don't think I've ever seen any other work of fiction drop so many individually iconic things all at once, just that in one straight shot. Like if you really think about how much shit is introduced in A New Hope, super casually, super thrown out, that every single one of those individual things would be a franchise, like TIE Fighters, Chewbacca, Millennium Falcon, the Force, lightsabers, Death Star, Darth Vader, etc. Going forever, just list everything. And I think that in of itself, just being in all of those cool things and have all of these really like impressive visuals, and then that's the centerpiece still. That's the big one. It's like, you thought all of these things were cool. This is a giant fucking thing where we're going to spend a lot of the movie inside of it, and then the entire third act is going to be about trying to conquer it, trying to defeat it. That immediately going to give it some kind of cultural heft that's going to be hard to mix with anything in all of like upper culture that kind of changed everything. Like the Death Star almost has like its final boss aura, more so than even, you could argue, Darth Vader or Palpatine, because it's this inhuman representation of the Empire. And I think just there's a little beautiful simplicity to it, as it's a very understandable threat. Blows up planet, got it. Which, even in a universe where we have space travel and stuff, isn't. You're allowed to still escape it. You can still write it in so the heroes can evade the Death Star by leaving the planet, but there's still like a very pulpy level of just like, oh no, this is weird. This is a. Because you can shoot someone, right? You can shoot someone, but if you're in a galaxy-spanning event, it's such small scale. You kind of need to raise up the things, and obviously the most obvious things you want to go to is like, if you look at some inspiration for like the Cold War and stuff, like the threat of the nuclear warhead and the threat of something like that. If you're going to scale that up to something that's in one shot the scale of like your planet being destroyed, and the rebel faction has to fight this industrialized opponent, I think it makes a really handy, very simple tool for that. So very good. They cooked with it. Just in A New Hope in of itself, I think the Death Star is pretty much perfect.
Steve?
I mean, I like the Death Star. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. The thing about the Death Star that I really like in the first movie, as opposed to anything else that comes later, is the destroying of the Death Star, and the Death Star as like an object that the movie orients around. I feel like the stakes are never as clear or as good and as satisfying as they are in that first movie, where you introduce the Death Star by Leia telling the where the rebel planet is, and Vader just fucking blowing it up. There's so many like things about the original Star Wars that just don't get picked up on later or twisted later, like the fact that like Vader's not actually in charge of anybody. He's just like some sort of religious zealot who still believes in the Force, but that there is like actual military protocol and procedure and stuff, and the Death Star is the expression of that, not necessarily the dark side. And I always thought that the idea that you had Luke as a character go on this journey where he's in a futuristic world where everything feels old and rickety, and he's going up against this brand new prototype weapon that no one's ever seen before, this one thing that feels really pristine compared to everything else in the universe, and the whole climax just revolves around like, let's just blow it up. Let's take the one neat, clean, brand new thing in this universe and just blow it up. I always thought that was really satisfying, and it's a really sort of nice metaphor for the kinds of sci-fi that Lucas was influenced by in making Star Wars. The kind of like lived-in feel of like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and that kind of stuff. So I really liked it as a conceit for that first movie. Coming back to it over and over and over again, I feel like starts to have a level of diminishing returns, especially if we want to talk about, and we can sidebar this for later, but especially if we want to talk about Starkiller Base, where I just feel like that's nowhere near as an emotionally interesting threat as the first Death Star was in the first movie, or even the second Death Star was in the third movie. All that being said, I love Rogue One. Rogue One is like my second favorite Star Wars movie. I think Rogue One is fantastic. And I love how much of that movie kind of captures that same feel that the original Star Wars did, which is the Death Star is kind of an anomaly even within the reality of the world where the characters are living. That this is the step too far for everybody. That the whole movie revolves around a suicide mission because the Death Star cannot be allowed to come to operation. And I feel like that's one of the only movies that ever feels like the gravity of that thing really feels earned. And a majority of the reason being because all the main characters die at the end. There's just an embrace in their suicidal plan at the end. And I feel like very few Star Wars movies outside of the original trilogy and The Last Jedi ever have that kind of balls again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I just kept like, as I was listening to the Thrawn book, which the whole first book is Thrawn slowly figuring out what the fuck the Death Star is, and then the whole second book is, no guys, that's dumb. You need to fund my TIE Fighter initiative because this is smart military spending, and Vader being like, fuck you. And then the whole third book being, well, I guess if I have to work to keep the Death Star afloat, I'll do it. But you guys are really fucking up here. And then it just started making me think about all the times that we've gone back to it. Like, I really like the first Force Unleashed game. Guess where the final boss fight of that one is? The Death Star that births the rebellion. You know, it's like the Death Star under construction. It's like this one in the second, or it's like the one in the third Star Wars movie. But this is the first Death Star. Just like constantly it's brought up in other media, like, oh, Wookiees were taken as slaves to build the Death Star. Why? I've never understood that one. It just seems like this really interesting like mark of the franchise. I think you put a really good name to it there, Alfie, because it's like this thing that all these other writers that are touching Star Wars have like as a grounding point of like, I need to do something cool to like, you know, make my story feel like it matters. So I'm gonna connect it to the Death Star somehow. To the point where like, how the fuck was this thing a secret? So many events take place surrounding it. And it kind of kills me. Fucking Rebels has a lot of plot development coming around the Death Star with like the whole excursion on Geonosis with Saw Gerrera. What is it? Like that plot is started in Clone Wars. That's a plot. Clone Wars at least has the decency to only have one Death Star related story that I can think of, in a very long run. But it's fucking everywhere, and it's kind of amusing as shit to me, to the point where, again, it just seems like we can't come up with any other ideas. You know, if you want to talk about the way that the first Star Wars movie just introduced so much stuff right off the bat and just like laid it all on the table, and then just apparently there was no more stuff to do after that. It just all was there. That was it. That was the entire franchise, just that anyone could ever think of. It was all just at least prototyped in the first movie. You know, maybe Starkiller Base deserves to be talked about now, because at the very least they tried to make it distinct in that it had to eat a star to kill a planet, and it like took longer, and like they put more limitations and tried to make it like stand out in some way. But I think everyone can just universally agree, no, it was just the Death Star again.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Starkiller Base is like, and this is sort of the thing with a lot of the post-original trilogy Star Wars stuff, where it's like, you can write as many explanations or theories or lore as you want about why a certain thing is the way it is, but if it just doesn't hit, then it doesn't hit, and anything after the Death Star just doesn't hit the same way the Death Star does. Not even the second Death Star.
Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, fucking Robot Chicken has had a field day with the second Death Star. Particularly, I think my favorite joke is still, yeah, can you make a Millennium Falcon-sized tunnel that leads directly to the core so that they can blow it up a little bit easier this time? Fucking kills me. Side point. So did they? Because like the whole thing about Rogue One, right, is that her dad like designed the reactor to have this fatal flaw, this Achilles heel, that like anything that touches the reactor will cause a chain reaction that'll make the whole thing blow up. Did they change anything about his design in the second, by the time they get around to the second Death Star? Because apparently that took much less time to make, even though it's bigger. But it blows up just as quickly.
So apparently, from what and I don't know if this has changed, because Star Wars lore keeps changing all the time, right? But from what I know, is the second Death Star was already Palpatine wanted a fleet of these fuckers, basically.
Oh.
So it was already being made while the first one was done. They were just planning to make basically the idea was every planet in the Empire would have a Death Star orbit it to keep them in line.
That's overly elaborate, even for Palps. And yet, here we are with the Star Wars movie that shouldn't have been. I really wish Alfie were the first one to bring up Rise of Skywalker, because I had a whole bit. I had a whole bit ready to go. Can we just pretend, Alfie? Yeah, can you bring up Rise, please?
Okay, so I was gonna say the only one of these I actually don't like is the one in Rise.
What's Rise?
Rise of Skywalker.
No, what are you talking about?
It's the 9th Star Wars movie.
Alfie, we all know that after they made Episode 8, they decided that that was the best any Star Wars could ever Star Wars, and that we were just done with this franchise, and it would just, die a peaceful death at the height of its power and influence and artistic integrity, and we wouldn't ever make another Star Wars thing. What the fuck are you talking about, Episode 9?
But again, this is your problem, is that if you know anything about the dark side of the Emperor, if we see a happy ending, we have to fuck it up. So Palpatine returned and decided,
Somehow.
no, Ian, none for you. And honestly, I'm glad he did, because I'm glad he keeps you two up at truly the greatest villain in fiction, if he could give real-life people misery. That's a level of power I'm not sure anyone can reach.
I'm sorry. Anyway, you were saying about the third Star Wars sequel movie.
Okay, so I'll go to my thing with Starkiller because you brought it up, because I think it's a nice segue. The thing I like with Starkiller is it would be weird if the First Order didn't try to have a Death Star. I feel, I feel like just they're so neo-Nazi fucking dick sucking the old Empire, right? Of course they would try to make that again if they're bringing everything else. They've got their own Vader, they've got their own fucking public. I feel like that's kind of, yes, it's J.J. Abrams nostalgia bait kind of thing, but if you're already working within that premise, I think it's more glaring if they didn't bring it up, than if they did.
Mm-hmm.
It being so close in structure to A New Hope, I think, is the real death nail. I think you could have found other ways to use it than had been shown in A New Hope, and you kind of had your cake and eat it too. The thing that I think would be a super simple fix that a couple of fan edits have done, which is just a kind of a power to Star Wars editing, right? Is they just fired it too early. If you see how Last Jedi opens, right, with them fleeing the planet and they're on the back run that entire movie, what a lot of fan edits do to lead into Last Jedi is they simply have it fire the moment Kylo stabs Han, and then the sky turns red and the fucking blast goes off and it destroys the New Republic, and they're like, this fucking beam's gonna hit us in fucking so much time. So then it becomes less, we have to take it down. It's more, we have to take it out and then we have to fucking leave because we're about to get fucking shot by this laser beam. And just that small little yes, we're doing A New Hope, but this time everything goes wrong, I think justifies okay, that's something we didn't see before, that we didn't, because how A New Hope ends is it's very celebratory, very hey, and then Force Awakens ends on more of a melancholic note, and then Last Jedi kind of takes that and runs with it. So I like all of that. If they had done that simple change, it doesn't require any plot thing, just a couple of audio lines changed and simply editing it so the sequence happens later, I think works super, super, super well to making that hit. But what I don't like about Rise of Skywalkers is I think it's like putting a hat on top of a hat. You already have this cool idea of this fucking legion of the Star Destroyers, and Ian, you've been reading the Thrawn books, right? And that's what he keeps bringing up, of the best thing to use with our resources is overwhelming numbers. That's what we have over these rebels. That's what we have over these things, is we've just got more fucking money, so we can just make 1 billion fucking ships, and we're gonna win any fight if we just send them all at one thing. We don't need one big target. We need 1,000 smaller targets. But because they're Star Destroyers, they're still fucking really big, So I think it would have been a lot better if the final fucking act of Palpatine is he finally fucking listens to that motherfucker Thrawn and is like, you know what? This is my last shot. I'm going as fucking efficient as possible. No more grandstanding, no more thing. I'm just going pure fucking what he said business. We've had this plan in the back corner and just scorched earth, right? Just burn everything down and rebuild it. I don't even need an empire anymore. Let's just fucking call it. That would have been a lot scarier to me, to see a Palpatine who is no longer concerned with the theatrics, because that's what works really well in Return of the Jedi, right? I don't know if you guys agree with me. I don't know what the consensus here is on Return of the Jedi, but I really like how fucking ballsy Palpatine is in that movie, where that only really works if he's got the fucking cojones to make another Death Star and stick it right in front of everyone and dare them to blow it up. I love that he fucking has that so close to being his perfect hater middle finger, and then it backfires in his face dramatically because he didn't think of the little people. He ignored nature, he ignored the small thing. I think all of that works brilliantly, but that's just me.
No, I mean, I like a lot of that. Palpatine is one of my favorite characters, and it's entirely because of Return of the Jedi. Like, him in the prequels is great, but him in Return of the Jedi is just the best fucking thing ever. Because you're right, the arrogance is there, and that's like the thing Luke says to him. It's like, your arrogance is your overconfidence is your weakness. Your faith in your friends is yours. It's just so...
You know what I love about Last Jedi? What I fucking love about that fucking movie is that proves Palpatine right. Is they're both right about each other, which I think is fantastic.
Yep. So like, it's just so fucking good, and yeah, you're right. He's just flooding it, like to the point where, oh, you want your lightsaber? Go ahead. Take it and strike me down, and your path to the dark side will be complete. Like, just again, the ballsiness of, you have to kill me. I've got the thing you can kill me with right here. Just take it, you little bitch. It's just the best thing ever. So no, I agree. I do like that aspect of him. But yeah, there is just like okay, so he's got 1 billion Star Destroyers, and they're all Death Stars. Well, then what the fuck did he need the Death Star for? What the fuck is this? How could the technology have gotten that much better? Like, what happened? It's so dumb. I don't like that movie. Steve, I don't like that movie.
There is another thing with like the diminishing returns of the Death Star, where like it sort of reminds me of Dragon Ball. After Vegeta says that he can blow up a planet with the Gallic gun, where like after a certain point, when you've blown up a planet, blowing up a planet is not a measure of anything.
No.
And so Star Wars kind of has that, where like after you blow up Alderaan and then you blow up the Death Star, I kind of just don't care if the next Death Star can blow up a planet. Like, we've done this already.
And then Starkiller Base is like, but we can blow up, like, 5.
Right, and it's exactly like Dragon Ball, where it's like, Majin Buu just keeps blowing himself up and regenerating. Like, I don't fucking care, dude. They blew people up 300 episodes ago. That means nothing to me.
Aww. But I like Majin Buu.
I like Kid Buu a lot, and I like Fat Buu. I don't really like Super Buu.
No one likes Super Buu. If anyone likes Super Buu as like their favorite Dragon Ball character, I have questions.
Well, I'll say this: I like dumb Super Buu. I don't like Buuhan, who's just Cell. But this is not a Dragon Ball thing.
Yeah, it always comes back to Dragon Ball. Just I don't know. That's the other thing. Fucking Frieza meets the Emperor. Oh, you have a machine that can blow up a planet. Well, isn't that cute? Check this out. Bong. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. The fucking 1 billion Death Stars that could all blow up a planet each is just the... there's so much fucking wrong with that goddamn movie. I've never had the heart to watch that movie a second time since coming back from the theater. Yeah.
I saw it in the theater and hated it, and then watched it again only because a friend really wanted to go and they didn't want to go alone. So I'm like,
Your
fine,
asses
but I'm not
are
gonna
so
like it.
dramatic, man. You're so fucking dramatic. I can't stand this.
Rise of Sky, I kid you not. In the last like 20 years, Rise of Skywalker is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
You're so dramatic. I can't. I can't.
Nah,
I
bro.
can't.
You can't even talk. You watch like 4 movies a year, and he's like, Creed 3, best movie of all time.
I love Creed 3. Creed 3 rock, man.
Yeah,
Let's
because
talk
you
about
see
Creed
4
3.
movies. When I say something is like the worst movie of the last 20 years, it's because I've seen like 500.
I'm just saying, Steve. It's dramatic as fuck.
It's fact. Anyway. No, so Death Star, yeah. So no, the diminishing return to the Death Star have that. I think part of the reason Rogue One kind of works the way it does, is it's really the first time in a Star Wars movie where it feels like you're getting a sense of what the on-the-ground cost of something like the Death Star actually is. The mainline Star Wars movies always deal with Force users and Skywalkers and stuff, and so like you've got a lot of cool heroes, but you also have a lot of just like heroes that can't die, or heroes that are kind of made of Teflon and everything just kind of bounces off of them. The hundreds, if not thousands, of people in X-Wings that died before these Crusades don't really get spots in those movies. And so when you watch Rogue One, it's entirely from the perspective of those people, and you go into it from the beginning with the understanding that everyone in this movie is going to die. And so you have to watch the whole thing with that in mind and realize that like these people are putting their life on the line for something. And I think being on the ground with them emotionally that close the entire time is why when everyone dies at the end, when the Death Star fires on it, it hits on the same level as something like A New Hope, because just like that movie, you're getting to see something unique for the first time. It's not the Death Star, but it is the consequence of the Death Star. Because like the thing with Alderaan is like, Leia's upset that the planet exploded, obviously, but you don't know anyone on that planet. You've never been to that planet. You don't even know what the word Alderaan is until they mention it. It's a name of a planet, and by then it's already blown up, right? Like there's no emotional attachment to there. You're not even really like invested in Leia, outside of just the sort of obvious she is the good guy and Vader is the bad guy, and you get to know her later. With Rogue One, there is that sort of immediate sense of like, I understand why all of these people are in this fight, and I do sort of feel something when all of them are inevitably going to die at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, I think, the thing that made Rogue One such a good movie. And it's like, it's that one of the everybody gets a Star Wars that, like, actually really worked out. Because, like, we all love Last Jedi here, but, like, Last Jedi is still just this really controversial and, like, divisive film in the franchise. People were, like, even the people that, like, didn't like Force Awakens were kind of willing to give it its due of, like, okay, well, it's just the celebration of we're making Star Wars again. So, I don't like it. It's not a very good movie, but whatever. It can go, and well, except for the people that didn't like Rey because girls can't use the Force or whatever the fucking logic was. But, like, generally there was, like, an acceptance of Force Awakens. And then, you know, the next one we got was Rogue One, and then Last Jedi, and then after that, it just, we stopped making Star Wars stuff, and we're all better for it.
100%.
I just am really gonna, like, try to delude myself that I live in this fucking world where we all just acknowledge that Last Jedi was so fucking good, we're just done making Star Wars now.
I mean, there's no reason to continue. Why would you? Oh my god.
Mark Hamill said that it was the best performance he ever gave in his life, and it was the perfect direction for Luke and everything, and we were all just so happy about it.
There isn't a single scene of anything that could have been made afterwards that hits as hard as "And I will not be the last Jedi."
Oh.
It's so good.
Come on my tits. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Anyway.
Yep. So no, it's just such a weird fucking thing that, like, they made Rogue One, and, like, Rogue One was the one I was least interested in that, like, initial round of announcements that they did, because it's just like everyone was so excited. It's like, oh, finally, it's a Star Wars movie without any of the Jedi and Force stuff. It's just going to be the Wars part. And I'm like, am I the fucking weirdo because I like the Jedi and Force stuff? But, you know, legitimately, you watch that movie, and it's like the one thing that I feel really earns using the Death Star again, touching it again, like even more so than something like Return of the Jedi, because it's just the one that feels like it really understands the scope and the weight that the Death Star has. Again, everything else, I just feel like you could write something that would serve the same purpose and just not be the Death Star again. Return of the Jedi is, I think, the only one you could make any kind of an argument for.
Well, and this is, and sorry, I'll shut up after this. But the other thing about the anachronism of Star Wars is that, like, when everything becomes iconic and you just keep repeating it over and over again, you kind of lose the brilliance of the first one and why it became iconic. Because the Death Star, right? It's not in and of itself the cool thing about that movie. It's that Lucas and company are borrowing from old sci-fi serials where every serial there is a new doomsday weapon. Mm-hmm. The Death Star is just the ultimate epitome of all of those collective doomsday weapons in old serials. But the way those old serials used to work is that every 15-minute episode there would be a new Death Star, essentially. There'd be something else that will end the world, and it would do it a different way, and you would just watch that on a week-to-week-to-week basis. Star Wars doing that and having it be the Death Star, where, like, out the gate, you're like, yeah, we have a giant moon that blows up planets, is just the 70s exaggeration of that old-school 40s idea. And when we got so hung up on just making the Death Star over and over again, we forgot the kind of appeal was you could just have an evil galactic empire keep making shit like this. And that's why it's fun to watch, because it's not the Death Star next. Now it's like a giant robot or something, but it accomplishes the same goal.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why this is what I thought of, Steve, but I'm gonna just paint you a mental picture. Right. So back when I worked at Goodwill, we'd get in, like, you know, these big bins full of toys and other just junk that, you know, people didn't want anymore, and we'd go through it and decide, okay, can we sell this or not? And you talk about, like, the serials just going to create the next big weapon. The Empire could have just kept doing that instead of the Death Star is just a big robot. Reminded me of when I pulled out of one of those bins a Death Star toy that was a Transformer.
Exactly. Exactly. Next Death Star is just a Transformer.
I mean, that's
it's fucking great.
Right?
It's pretty fucking sick.
It's Unicron.
It is just Unicron.
Yeah, it's literally Unicron.
But you know what? Fuck it, we ball. It's a great idea. Could you imagine how fucking cool the Death Star 2 would have been if Palpatine pressed a fucking button and it just turned into Unicron?
Peak.
Yeah, that would be good. It's what do you guys make of the thing with the Death Star where, like, we keep adding to its origin, right? Like, within the film of itself, we've got that, but we've got Andor, and then we've got the prequels, have numerous scenes from, like, Attack of the Clones onwards, and then the Clone Wars has, like, episodes dedicated to it, and then even the micro series has something, and then obviously the novels and stuff of just, like, different reasons and different fucking the loops you had to go through to make this fucking thing. Mm-hmm. Like, because that's something as well that I think, if Steve was talking about diminishing returns of, like, the actual thing, I feel like we've done this is how Han Solo got his blaster for the Death Star, like, over 100 times by now. Mm-hmm. I just like, we're gonna at this point get to the point where, like, Palpatine's gonna be fucking looking up at the sky, and, like, his dad's gonna be like, "Oh, what'd you see? You're looking at the moon," and he's like, "Oh, that's no moon. And then fucking cuts the credits as his mind's eye going to it. So like because they've got the whole thing where the worst one is that it exists because it was meant to be used against the Yuuzhan Vong for the old EU heads, the fucking invading alien race from outside the Star Wars galaxy. Palpatine encountered with a fucking probe while he was Chancellor and was like, the only way to defeat these guys is the Death Star. And so it was actually a good thing that the Death Star existed, is certainly an interpretation. So there's that, but like the other thing I do like is I think there was a couple writers in those EU books that disagreed with each other, because they had another one where they had like Imperial remnants talking about like how to deal with the problem, and that they wished Palpatine was here because they could have used his leadership. And then Han Solo comes in and he's like, no, you guys would have just built a really big gun and then it would have blown up and killed us all. So I'm actually really glad that you're not in charge anymore. And I was like, yeah, that is kind of the solution to everything. So there's a lot of that back and forth. But do you guys have any like? I know Steve. I still haven't seen it. I know Steve's a big fan of Andor, so I don't know how that handles it. But do you guys have any like preferences or scenes you've liked from like Clone Wars or the books or anything where it's you're like, oh, this is a cool, like, this is how the Death Star should have been made moment, and then we didn't need anything else but that?
Outside of Rogue One, I've never really needed that. You mentioned Andor, but Andor doesn't actually go into any of that, as far as I remember, because Andor is not like really connected to Rogue One outside of the fact of explaining who Cassian Andor is. It's just a show about a dude who gets swept up in the rebellion and the reason why he wants to be a rebel, but it's really got nothing to do with the Death Star, at least as far as I remember. But Rogue One's kind of the only time I ever really like cared or needed an origin for it. I remember reading some of those old school EU books too, because they used to be at my school library, and that whole thing about the Yuuzhan Vong being like they exist outside of the Force, so the Sith and the Jedi have to unite to stop them and all that bullshit. They were really fucking cool, but even that I didn't really like take much stock in, because the Death Star has this idea where Palpatine has it so that he can blow up planets and rules the galaxy. Doesn't really, to me, feel like a thing that needs any sort of explanation beyond just that premise of big gun, blow up planet, empire happy, you know? So I never really thought of it more than that. I like what Rogue One does with it, because I don't necessarily need an explanation for why the Death Star blows up when Luke hits it, but I do love this character of what's his name?
Galen
Malin. Yeah, I love this idea that like he didn't want to build it, but he decided that like if he doesn't do it, someone else will. So he might as well do it so that he can make a weakness inside of it. That's sort of like I can like rip apart the machine from the inside mentality, and how that gets passed down to Jyn Erso and all that stuff. I like that quite a bit, but that's only because I like Jyn Erso as a character a lot, and it didn't have to be a Death Star. It could have been anything in Star Wars as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's like all the time whenever I see it come up, I'm just like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. That's the explanation. Like, I kind of liked that it was the setting for the final levels of Force Awakens, or not Force Awakens, Force Unleashed. But that was just because it was kind of cool to, like, get to walk through the corridors of the super laser and, like, fucking destroy the big panels of kyber crystals, you know? I didn't really...
It's also just cool as fuck, like, tearing off pieces of the Death Star and throwing them at Vader and shit.
Yeah, right? Like, that was just, like, fun video game kind of logic, right? But again, just every time that it is something with the Death Star in anything I read or see, it's just like, it could be anything, though. It doesn't need to be the Death Star, and it feels like it, like, kind of cheapens it by doing so, you know? I don't really like the way that we feel this need to constantly go back and remine something over and over and over again. It just makes it less than. So I don't know. No, I don't think I really have anything where it's like, this is what it needs to happen. I kind of like. I will say, the thing I like is the fact that like everyone is painfully aware of all the flaws with the Death Star after it blows up. Like that happened in the Gillen Vader comic. Is you had Mahdi, I think that's Moff Mahdi or whatever, sitting there talking about how many Star Destroyers could we have built with Tarkin's folly, and Vader's like, Tarkin had vision, and all this shit. Like that's really funny. The fact that like just everything after it's destroyed, everyone's like, oh yeah, no, this is a terrible idea. But I guess we're doing another one. Just fucking kills me. So no, I don't know. I don't really like that we keep going back to the Death Star. And it's just kind of funny because I never really picked up on it until I was just listening to Thrawn. Like it just kind of hit me like, man, we do a lot of shit with the Death Star, and I never like any of it.
And to be fair, for the longest time after Disney bought Star Wars, we kind of were trapped in the Episode 3, Episode 4 little time period where the Death Star was being built and destroyed. So, like, for like a good 4 or 5 years, we had like nothing but end of prequel, start of original trilogy era stuff, and then just slightly teasing things about sequel trilogy material that almost all fell apart.
Yeah. Have they done anything? Like, I've completely fallen off of Star Wars EU stuff, outside of the Thrawn books that I just recently listened to. Have they fucking done anything with the sequel trilogy shit yet? Has Rey had her own book yet?
No.
There's a Knights of Ren book, right?
Yeah, it's terrible, man. Oh,
yeah, I figured.
I wish they never did that. It's because they do they pitched it as like, okay, the movies are over now. We're finally gonna do spin-off stuff around the sequel trilogy. We're starting with a book around Kylo Ren's origin. It's like, oh fuck, that's a great fucking premise. I wonder what that's like. And it was like the most fucking bland, needless, this has no fucking source whatsoever. This is so it's not even outright bad. It's just there, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm excited for when this story eventually gets ignored with someone better to make a real version of this. But no one, there was a Poe comic for a little bit there. But
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was bad.
They've done nothing with Rey. They've done nothing with Finn, which you'd think would be the fucking easy. Do a fucking Finn novel where he becomes a Jedi, man. It's so fucking easy to get some free cash from that, right? And then if a movie comes out and wants to do that, just have it be retcon. No one cares. just there's so many fucking things with the sequel trilogy. No, they haven't. The one thing they did, which kind of teases to the Death Star thing we talked about, Ian, is they have in one of the recent Vader runs, they have Vader go to Exegol. They have him go through his thing and follow the thing and go to Palpatine's thing, and it's Palpatine base. It's sat after Empire, pre-Return of the Jedi, and it's meant to be kind of the explanation for why Vader looks so defeated in Return of the Jedi. Because he's Palpatine basically brings him there as a show of you were really ballsy with that whole your son thing. So I just want you to remember that this is your fucking place, and I've got fucking clone bodies, and I've got all this shit that if you try anything, it will not work. And it's kind of meant to demoralize Vader. It's not the worst idea in the world. It's very clunkily done. But that's the only real thing they've done. They've been very, very anti-sequel trilogy shit. They're much more prequels and OT, and even OT. They're all early OT or after Return of the Jedi. There's nothing like Return of the Jedi or Empire time period.
That's disappointing. Kind of it's crazy because it's been that way since 2015. It's almost 10 years of not wanting to touch this new stuff that they developed.
Yeah, I don't get why, because the prequels were you could make an argument they were even more panned, because the majority of the first two sequel trilogy movies, like Last Jedi, was its own thing, right? But like critically, the first two did very well. You'd think that so much of Star Wars survived on the media in the prequel, the push they had, like everything coming out, prequel games, prequel comics, prequel animated series, that lots of people who have nostalgia for that thing aren't for the movies, it's for all the side stuff that came out, because a lot of the side stuff was super fucking good. Like the prequel things that came out that were like the animations or the games and shit, fucking rock. They were fantastic. Like, everyone loved that stuff. Like people really like the comics and things. If they wanted to revive the sequel interest, man, just start pumping those fuckers out, right? Like, pump some games out, pump some fucking things out. It's been nothing. It's just been a black spot, and then anytime something does come out, it's always original trilogy focused.
Yeah, and it just...
Well, I mean, that's what you get when, like, Dave Filoni runs everything, and, like, every 4 weeks you have a new TV show set with Clone Wars characters. Like,
Which feels just... so... Go ahead, Steve.
It's just stuck in this rut with a writer that can't write, and so like you're never going to get anything beyond that because Star Wars feels like it got burned by doing something different with Last Jedi. So now they will never do something different ever again.
What just hurts me with that is like, I don't have any personal thing with Dave Filoni. I agree with you, Ian. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm not super big on his writing, but like, he's made a big deal of like, Clone Wars was his big break, you know? And like Clone Wars is exactly the kind of thing they'd never... Can you imagine them making a fucking 5-season animated series set in the fucking sequel era? They'd never do it, right? They'd never make Clone Wars, and that feels like, for something that so praised by the fandom and the creatives who are in charge and the characters that are showing up are all coming from that. You'd think the smart thing would be like, all right, like let's make the Clone Wars equivalent for the sequel trilogy, right? Like, I don't see what the problem is.
Didn't they do that? Wasn't there a Clone Wars style show?
One Star Wars Resistance.
Yeah. Which
was set just before a new Force Awakens, and it was about like the Rebel pilots and stuff, and it's almost what I'm talking about there because it was so detached. It had nothing to do with any of the sequel. It was all like the offshoot Rebel dudes. Like it was, and even Rebels like had Darth Vader show up, had Ahsoka show up, like had these people show up. Resistance had like you got a hologram of Kylo Ren one time.
That's rough, buddy.
It's just a shame.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's disappointing. I don't know why they're so... Well, no, I take that back. I do know why. I'm annoyed that they're so hesitant to do anything. Because it is just, like, ultimately kind of killing any potential that series has. Because you can't have people fall in love with it despite the quality issues if there's just nothing there to fall in love with, you know?
Right.
So that is just like fundamentally disappointing. I don't know, man, but to tie us back to the Death Star a little bit, do you guys have like a outside of the original film, like a favorite time that it showed up for no reason?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what's that?
One of my favorite moments in all Star Wars, maybe one of my favorite moments in all film. I fucking love the shot of fucking Vader and Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that shit's fucking gold, man. What a way to end your fucking movie, right? That shit's hit. Like, and again, it's got kind of a weird CGI Tarkin, but he's kind of in the distance, so it doesn't really... Just the lighting on Vader in that fucking shot, and the Palpatine when he puts his arms on his shoulders and the Imperial March. Not a single line of dialogue in the entire thing. Just, you know, the Empire has won. And I love that the imagery as well, if I want to go fucking film school on it. It's literally a full stop on the Empire's plan. It's like, all right... Paragraph closed. We did it, boys. Like, it's like Palpatine's like, if you want just a visual image that Palpatine's won and we're here now, it's that. Like, it's just that image of Vader and Palpatine watching the Death Star be built. It's like, okay, yeah, we fucking won. The bad guys win. Like, I love the balls on that. I love the balls that we just had 10 years after Revenge, maybe like 5 years or something. We had after Revenge of the Sith, and that was just one of the we had the Luke thing right afterwards, right? But just right before it, the scene like 2 seconds before that, is just the villains totally and ultimately winning in a gorgeous shot. So yeah, that's one of my favorite images, and that's been seared into my brain since I was a child. I love that shot.
How about you, Steve? You can't say Rogue One.
I mean, Rogue One. It's like that's kind of it. Shit. A time the Death Star shows up randomly that I actually like. I don't know if I have any. I feel like every time it shows up, I'm kind of where you are, Ian, where I always kind of wonder, like, why does everything rotate around the Death Star's existence? It kind of takes me out more than brings me in, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't think I have anything. I guess I could say, like, end of Force Unleashed fight scene that you mentioned. That was pretty fun. Just watching the fucking dude run through the different pipes and having to dodge between the lasers and stuff in the alleyways. Like, that was pretty fun.
Okay, you made me think. I'll give my answer to the question I posed in a second, but you did make me think of this. So, like, they're just test firing the Death Star in that level, right? Yep. Like, they're constantly just, testing the super laser. But, like, you think about it, if you just fire a beam off into space, right, it's going to go forever until something gets in its way to stop it. And this is planet-killing energy just going. Which, like, if it was just one, yeah, you'd probably fight. But it's just boom, boom.
You want to know why the Yuzhong Vong coming to the known galaxy to kill all the Jedi and Sith? Because Palpatine kept firing the laser into empty space.
All right. So mine is one that I haven't actually read. I'm gonna preface that, so it's possible that I've gotten just a very skewed take on this, but just when I was listening to Mr. Sunday Movies talk about this, I just lost my shit laughing my ass off. So it's from a Star Wars comic that's basically like a Star Wars what if, and it's more like what if Luke died and Leia had to be the chosen one. And in that, Yoda fucking hijacks the Death Star and just basically calls Palpatine, who's on Coruscant at the time, and is like, hey yo bitch, guess what? And it just fucking rams the thing into Coruscant. Which is just the dumbest, stupidest, but funniest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Of just the panel of Yoda piloting the Death Star into the surface of Coruscant. And I've never wanted to read the comic because of just the absurdity of that. But I just like that someone wrote that and then some motherfucker had to draw it. It's really funny to me.
That is pretty good, yeah.
So yeah, I think that's mine. I'm not sure if I've got much else to say on the Death Star. Steve, put this idea out there, so I guess we'll go ahead and do it. What are your rankings on between Death Star 1, Death Star 2, Starkiller Base, the fleet of Death Stars, Death Star Transformer? What do you rank those guys?
OG, I think, has to be universally one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2 is trickier because I like
hard.
Yukon goes kind of hard. I do like the aesthetic of. I do like that Starkiller Base is a planet that comes. I do think that's cool visually, and I like that it's beam fucking. Like it fucking splinters off. I think that's a cool. I think that scene is shot very well. I like how that imagery looks. But it's just narratively, it's not as juicy as Death Star 2. And I do like like in Battlefront 2 and stuff, you can go to the Death Star 2, and I do like that the fucking it's half built. And there's a
The
construction
aesthetic
line,
of the half-built Death Star is
Yeah.
just so fucking sick.
So
And when
that's
people get like fucking Death Star tattoos, it's usually Death Star 2 where it's half built. It just looks so fucking
yeah, it is good. So I'm gonna go for Starkiller just because it has a little bit more like. I feel like that design could be used in a better film. Like I think that could have been used elsewhere. I think Death Star 2 kind of reached its, but like that was used as well as it could be. You know, like the ceiling had been reached for Death Star 2. And now Death Star 2 will be free, and then fleet of fucking Death Stars should be at the very bottom.
Okay. Steve, do you disagree with his list at all?
I mean, Death Star 1 is number 1, obviously. Nothing gonna ever top that. But I will throw in my number 2 is transforming Death Star into Unicron. Like, that's the greatest thing anyone's ever thought of ever. And the only reason it's not number 1 is because we haven't seen it on film yet. The second it happens, it's number 1. Are you fucking kidding me? It's a giant planet and a mech? Are you kidding? Then number 3 would be Death Star 2, and then I'd put Starkiller Base, and then I'd put the fleet of Death Stars.
Okay. So I'm going to stand out from the crowd here. I agree narratively, I like Death Star 1 more, but just, again, the aesthetic of Death Star 2 is so fucking cool. To go from just, it's a sphere, to, like, just the fact that it's half complete just looks so fucking cool. You could just have made that the first one, and it didn't need to be a perfect sphere. It would have been fine. So yeah, Death Star 2 is my number 1. Death Star 1 is my number 2. Say that 10 times fast. Then I'm going to go with Starkiller Base and Fleet of Death Stars. And then Unicron Death Star just is going to sit there in the honorable mention until it gets to show up on screen. Just fucking
Star Wars Transformers crossover when?
For real though. Okay, side thing. This has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. Kinda. Went to a Doctor Who museum over the weekend that we found out was in Indiana. It was only a couple hour drive, so we went there for the weekend. That was pretty cool. It was mostly merchandise. They had a couple props. They had a working Dalek that talked to you when you came in and told you to buy something or you'd be exterminated. They had a TARDIS that the back half had been opened up to become a shelf, so that was pretty cool. Had a couple props here and there. But then they had some merch, and the best toy merch that they had, not for sale, mind you, because I would have bought it, even though I'm not a fan of the aforementioned franchise. You can probably guess where I'm going with this, but I'm going to just send you all the picture real quick, because holy shit, it was so sick. Wait for it. Waiting.
Yo, Tardimus Prime!
Yeah.
He's got a bow tie!
That's really good. I like that. I like
my
that a lot.
Yeah.
I love that.
So apparently the secret to any franchise is just take the most iconic mechanical thing and make it a transformer, and suddenly you've got the best thing ever.
Well, I mean, there are two genders, right? There are, give me your premise, and then a predator shows up. And then there's, give me your premise, but then it turns into a robot.
I've forgotten about a predator shows up.
So, alright, so hear me out, right? Alright? Palpatine's rebuilding the Death Star, and Darth Vader's by his side, and then Luke is gonna jump into the Death Star and try to blow it up again. And then a predator shows up.
Where do I sign? Why are we not funding this?
I mean, I know, right?
It's so good.
It's been 2 years since Prey came out, and I still want another Predator movie where he just shows up in some other random time zone.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, again, for the longest time, I wanted a period piece Predator movie, and now we should just keep doing them.
It's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think that does it for us. I think that's the end of the topic here. Thanks for talking about the Death Star with me, guys.
No problem.
Anytime.
Yay. All right, so what do we want to talk about next time?
It is Alfie's turn.
I might not be able to make it next time, so that might not be a good idea for it to be Alfie's turn.
Oh no. Guess we could do another review.
If you want, or a topic, it's up to you, Steve. You have the power. The power of Grayskull.
Fuck yeah, man. He-Man rules. No, not really. I don't really like He-Man that much. Let's review. Trying to think of something that I would have wanted to talk about that I've seen recently.
You don't just want
right.
to talk about everything you've seen. You're not just like me.
Well, this might be a good one. I've been going through all of Michael Mann's movies just because I liked Ferrari so much, and so I've been doing them in order. And I thought it might be fun to talk about this one with you because you're more of a history guy anyway. So you might have some opinions about this and the depiction of the French and the British and the indigenous and all that shit. But do you want to talk about The Last of the Mohicans?
Sure. I've never heard of.
Right.
I've never watched that movie. I've heard about it a bunch, but never watched it.
It came out in 1992,
Yep,
directed by Michael Mann.
that was the era for those. Yep.
Exactly. That's why I want to talk about it with you, because you've got Troy, you've got Gladiator, you've got what's it called, Master and Commander. You've got so many of these.
Yeah. No, that was the era. The '90s was the era of let's make movies about Native Americans, but specifically just wiping them out. All right. So I think that'll do it. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, you will feel the wrath and power of this fully armed and operational battle station.